Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to get some clarity about who we are, where we can go, and how we can heal our inner selves and perhaps the people around us. On the program today, we're going to be talking with someone who studied for more than 40 years to eventually become an intuitive healer in the world of medicine. She's also a healer, psychic, and since childhood she's become directed, practical, insightful, and a spiritual advisor to people from around the globe. On the program, we're going to be talking about her new book, which is a marvelous way that we can approach this whole process. It's also very, very deep and something that's very insightful for all of us to share. The book is called Soul Rays. Discover the vibratory frequency of your soul. You can find this on Kindle. And I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our special guest, Candia Sanders. Candia, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, we appreciate having you on the program, especially with something like this. This isn't really something that you see a whole lot out there. It's kind of one of those things that I would think, people would find sort of buried in the metaphysical section somewhere in the back, but you're really out there in the forefront with this particular theme here that, this is something people should really start paying attention to, especially this day and age.
Well, I appreciate that because I feel the same way from working with people years now and with people from all ages. It started to become more and more clear to me how relevant and important understanding what this frequency is all about. And it opened up all kinds of windows for me. So I finally got to a place where I said, okay, I better put this into print, narrow it down and put it into print.
Yeah, I've noticed too, Candy, I was actually talking with someone about this actually more than once over the last several months, that we've really shifted into it almost feels like a new dimension, I guess. I can't think of a better way to put it. And they were kind of curious, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I kind of find the things that I think or that I intend kind of just showing up right away, and then it wasn't something that I was really used to. And I'm hearing this from other people as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I totally agree. I have felt, back when John Lennon wrote Instant Karma, and it's still to this day one of my favorite songs, has actually...
And it does get you.
It does. It does get you. It does. It's that it has absolute relevancy. And what I have noticed, let's put it that way, in the years that I've been doing this, is that the time frame has shifted and shifted and shifted in the sense that what used to take us lifetimes to have things actualized have become closer and closer and closer to the event horizon, if you will. And what you put out, you're getting back almost as if it were instant karma. I don't feel it is absolutely minute by minute yet, but I feel we're getting closer. So if you're putting something out or you're intending something big or you are thinking about someone, perhaps you'll hear from them in the next day or the next week instead of, 2 years later or in the past, lifetimes later. So I agree with you. I'm not a scientist, so can I say readily, easily what it's all about? No. From an intuitive point of view, I feel like we have moved up in the, let's put it this way. If we were climbing up a ladder of consciousness, I feel like we just climbed another rung, and with that gives us more awareness.
Now, I'm kind of thinking, because you put it that way, when you take a look at the state of affairs in the world today, and I think in America, and it's only because when you're in your own backyard, that's what you tend to experience the most of, versus what's really going on outside around the world, is we seem to be in a lot of unrest, aggravation, and yet we keep perpetually trying to continue toward peace to get things to kind of, just settle down so we can go about our lives and enjoy our lives. What do you think that's all about?
Well, that's a real complicated question, actually, because it involves so many different layers.
Right.
You've got the layers of consciousness from the higher ends down to the dark ends, and I see that individually in the soul rays of people, right? That there is definitely an element out there, and I don't like to go to the dark side at all, but there is definitely an element out there of individuals that are part of a darker cabal, if you will, that are always trying to manipulate and control the planet and have been doing it for centuries and eons, if you will. And then there are those at the other end of the light spectrum that are working towards greater peace and consciousness, which is all part of that Mayan solstice event that happened or didn't happen depending on your perspective. So there is definitely a group out there that we are trying to change the consciousness because we are more aware, we are more conscious, and I hate using that word over and over again, but it's really true. It's about the expanding of our awareness of what is going on the planet. And so with that being said, it's those of us in that realm, that frequency, that are working towards peace to help the rest of the world kind of wake up and say, yeah, wouldn't that be a nice place to be? I really feel that most human beings, if you were to ask them from one side of the planet to the other, that's what they want. It's just a small faction that continues to control, to create the wars, to create the chaos, to create the financial unrest. Aren't we lucky?
But it kind of makes you wonder, too, at the same time, what would peace be like if we just had it constantly, you know?
Well, great question, because I've always said this, that we as human beings, see, here's the flip side. Nothing is as a straight-up shot, right? Because if we got total peace and we lived in total bliss, which sounds fabulous and great on a lot of levels, we are creatures of drama. Everybody laughs at me when I say this, but okay, imagine yourself on a beach for 6 months, no options. That's what you get to do, is you get to just ohm it out, om, and meditate and relax and do nothing else. After a while, you'd be bored out of your brain and you go create something.
Right.
So if we get to a place of total peace, we are going to create something. It doesn't necessarily have to mean chaos. It doesn't have to necessarily mean war. But we are going to create something because we are creatures of habit, in a sense. We have been hardwired for drama. It goes back into our original intention of when we were, running away from the saber-tooth.
Mm-hmm.
There's that level of adrenaline that's part of our system. And so for us to go into total peace, I would love to think we could go to that place. However, it's not that I'm skeptical. It's not that I'm cynical. I just feel that we love drama. So if it's not war, this means that, it can end up being relationship challenges or, career challenges. We're gonna do it on some level.
I think sometimes we just have a view of peace that's much different than it maybe truly is. And, as you were talking about that, I was thinking of the Sylvester Stallone movie, Demolition Man. And, for those who may not be familiar, it's actually a lot of fun, but, it's where he goes into cryostasis and they bring him out something like 70 or 80 years later, I can't remember what it was, to chase down a criminal. They also put in cryostasis as well that they allowed out. Well, this guy, he gets out into the new America, if you will, and it's peaceful. It seems like people are walking around in togas. The society is softened. And the cops are bored because they really haven't had anybody to go out and even write tickets to, for crying out loud. And so here, this character played by Wesley Snipes, basically all hell starts breaking loose, and these people stand here stunned. They have no idea what to do. But you realize, that, hey, after a while the police are starting to go, I'm kind of getting into this idea of danger and unpredictability, sort of a thing. But, I always wondered about that idea because you think peace, and you think, what do you have, great weather all day long?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I think that's a really valid point.
Mm-hmm.
I see it all the time.
Now, you talk about in your book soul rays, and I hear this a lot, but that, our souls come here because there are things that we're supposed to be learning to evolve. What does that look like sometimes?
Again, I love how deep your questions are. I think they're great. On the other side, because I go back and forth between the my living 3D, 4D reality to being on the other side in terms of checking out people's souls and what they're choosing. This is actually, I got to take a side for just a second on that. I've been called on this by different people that, I'm not so great with time management. I'm going, well, can you understand why, please? Because
Right.
I'm not always here. So because time to me is such an illusion, right? So being on the other side, when we make these choices, we have these, this ability to say, okay, I'm going to choose this family, this experience, and we have the exact moment in time that we get to choose our arrival. We get to choose even how we look, even down to the whether our heart has an irregular heartbeat or whatever. I really believe we have complete control in the process. Now, there are several different theories out there, depending on how you view life, how your perspective is if this one, of course, there are still those on the planet who don't believe in the reincarnational cycle, which is really, really hard for me to not even believe that that's a possibility in your mindset. I mean, I'm so evident in front of our faces and in literature and in our great books. So to come back, we have that philosophy of, are we going to come back and learn? Well, you can choose. This, the best analogy on this, of course, is Groundhog's Day, because he goes back and forth over and over and over and over again. But through time, he recognizes the only way it's going to change is if he improves, if he expands on his life, on his brain, on his consciousness, on his loving commitment to the people around him. And that's how I see life. I really feel that, if we continue to stay in those same old cycles, after a while you're going to get, there we go back to the word of being bored. Okay, I'm not doing anything but raping and pillaging. Maybe there's something else I could do. Maybe I might enjoy having a glass of wine by the beach,
Mm-hmm.
So you get to that place where you do eventually evolve, when you're on the other side, say, okay, I'm going to come into this a lot more conscious, I'm going to do a better job, because it accelerates our growth so that we can then, as souls, as beings, move on into the expansiveness of the universe. Now, of course, to be perfectly frank with you, that's our perspective, that's my perspective from being here on the planet and seeing through the lens that I have. Does it mean it's absolute truth? For me, it's truth. Does it mean it's actual truth from the bigger perspective?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Nobody really knows. I just believe that all levels of consciousness, which means this level, the place, I guess we could call it purgatory, if you will, because I think the Catholics had something there in the sense that there is a place where the souls kind of hang out, learn, go to university, do what they can to evolve and change, and maybe go to other places in the universe or choose to come back to this planet or whatever planets that they want to go inhabit for a point in time. So I feel that each level is always evolving, always expanding, so that what we do on this planet impacts the souls that are in the astral levels. And that what's happening in the astral level is going to impact the next layer and higher level of consciousness and on up the scale. I feel the whole dynamic of the universe is perpetually evolving, perpetually expanding, and perpetually growing more conscious on all levels. I don't feel anything is stagnant. We tend to, as humans, think it's just the earth plane and that heaven is nirvana and it's all perfect and wonderful. And I'm sure it is on certain levels, but I also feel from being in and out of that time-space continuum that those souls on that level are also expanding. A lot of the people a lot of the guides that people call their angels are souls that are on the other side that have a wider perspective of what's really going on. Then, of course, you keep going up the layers in there, or you go up into the creator gods, the higher consciousness beings. However, the ones that kind of hang out at our level are usually souls that are just on the other side that are here helping. So I just find it fascinating, the labels that we put on things. And I am continually, consistently learning and changing in my perspective, because I'm going, wow, I hadn't thought about that. I believe in a lot of things that I believed in when I was 12 years old, and yet from that time frame I have expanded and changed and said, I keep adding to my belief patterns, because, and this is what cracks me up about religions, is people hold on to a certain premise and never change. Oh my God, everything else in the world has changed. Science has changed. Technology has changed. Geography has changed. Everything has changed except for religion. I think it's fascinating. And yet for me, it's what is exciting is to continually change and grow and say, wow, that's a new idea. That's a new concept. Boy, I hadn't looked at it that way. That's the world that I live in.
What's really interesting about that when you bring up religion is that just recently I had checked out a couple of books from the library that basically talked to you about history as we were taught history and the reality of the certain events that we were talked to about. And, like in some cases, this is how Hollywood has actually shaped what we think really happened on particular events. For instance, one of them is the parting of the Red Sea and Moses. Well, he didn't really do that. It was actually a little reed lake somewhere.
Yeah, it was really the Reed Sea. and it was a volcano and volcanic activity and earthquakes, tidal wave that moved the ocean. Yes, I totally.
You know, and then the idea of the birth of Jesus, they couldn't seem to get that one right in the Bible, you know, and this book points out the realities of what it actually says in the Bible. And, you know, and it goes on, and that's just the Bible, you know, there's other things they talk about as well, which it was just really funny to read this book and go, really? And I first got clued in with something like this about a year ago when I came across this piece of work that was talking about, you know, how we come to believe things as they are, but the reality of what it is isn't what we thought it was. And one of them is, one of the great things that we always hear is Christopher Columbus set out to find out whether or not the world was round or whether it was flat. Okay, we've all heard that, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what's fascinating about that is that was actually something that was created by the founder of Cornell University in the late 1800s. The fact is that the Greeks, thousands of years ago, could within 1 mile precisely circumvent the globe, and they knew that the world was round thousands of years ago, down to the degree of 1 mile, but that we kept running around saying we believed the world was flat until Christopher Columbus set out to prove that it wasn't. And the fact that this was, you know, I guess a truth that was put out there by a guy that founded a university here in America kind of left you scratching your head, how much more should we believe about what we've been taught? And then so, as you say, you know, our job here is to learn, to grow as soul, to go from one level to the next. Kind of take a look at perhaps your beliefs that keep you from doing that. And that's what I've seen a lot about reading in your book, Soul Rays, is kind of getting an idea, you know, what are the tools and what steps do I take to do exactly what you suggest?
Great segue. I have to compliment you. That was a beautiful segue. I love that.
I'm trying to think of, I think I'm trying to operate from the crystal ray, but I'm not too sure.
I love that. You're moving from, I loved it, moved from Christopher Columbus right into soul rays. That's brilliant. I love that. So actually, to be honest with you, we haven't really explained what a soul ray is yet, but my concept, I keep expanding with this idea.
Right.
So I'm writing one on politics because that's really fascinating. The whole concept of there are similarities, there are patterns within our consciousness, and political leaders all vibrate to 3 different rays, and sometimes a 4th one. So it's just really interesting. And then I'm going to do one on relationships. And as you speak, I mean, I could do one completely on historical figures as to like Christopher Columbus and what type of soul or what type of frequency he had chosen to create, you know, his interaction with the Portuguese and the Spanish crown, and how he got to be on a ship, and you know what his frequencies were to get him to that place.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole other concept. But I loved your segue. How great is that?
Well, let's talk about what soul rays are and how that all works.
Well, how it started for me, to be honest with you, the concept of a soul ray did not come into my consciousness until the mid-late 90s. Okay, so it's a newer concept for me. This is not something that I've known about or believed in for decades. This is a newer concept. And I was going to a woman for some, you know, I've throughout my years I've sought out mentors, teachers, and I was seeing this woman and working on expanding my own intuitive abilities, and she put me through this quick meditation. I mean, it was really a quick 5-minute visualization on discovering what my soul ray was, which was totally alien to me. I had not a clue what I was even doing or what I was looking for or anything. So I went through the meditation, got my colors, and I thought, oh, okay, that's cool. Now what? You know, we moved on, didn't talk anything about it. So then when I started, because I've always been the intuitive, when I brought healing into my readings with people, really started happening about 1999, 2000, somewhere in there is when I started integrating the two. I guess I'll call them gifts, because I've been intuitive since my awareness started at about 4, and then healing came in there, and it was just due to my own journeys and all those other good things. I don't need to really go into that piece because I want to stay with this. And so I started asking, when a person sat down or I was on the phone with them, okay, what is your vibration? What is your, okay, I'd get their birthday, so I understood if they were a Capricorn or a Virgo or whatever. I am not an astrologer, so I don't go into the aspects of the rising, the ascendant or the rising sign or the moon or all that. That's not my story. That's somebody else's. I enjoy it, but it's not my story. But it's one aspect. Okay, this person's a Capricorn, as an example. So then I go, okay, I ask quietly, what is your frequency? And so I started writing them down and started paying attention to the similarities and what I now call guilds of what the rays meant. Well, what I have found is that, and I'll describe it this way, a soul ray is the frequency of choice that we have when we are choosing our physical body. So we have that choice before any given time frame, any lifetime. It's a vibration of energy and color in which we come here to explore our emotional, our mental, and physical attributes and expand our awareness. So if you know that, okay, you're getting ready to try on this particular, we'll say this dress or this suit, in essence, okay, I'm going to choose this frequency to wear to the Academy Awards, because in essence that's what life is this opportunity to shine. So you're putting on a red dress or an orange dress, and you move right on up through the color spectrum. Those first 7 rays all correspond, or chakras, because they correspond to the chakras, all correspond to an endocrine gland and an area of energy in your body. And then you have the upper or outer frequencies of the rays that move beyond the spectrum. So you move through, and I'm just going to, like I said, from the indigo violet, and then you move up to the pink ray, and then you move into silver and gold and crystal, and then rainbow. And then we have those that are off planet, so the souls and beings that are out there that are not of this planet vibrate of a higher frequency. Those are the platinum and the diamond. And then there are those who choose to come in on the rainbow ray, which is multidimensional in the sense that they come in wearing the attributes of every color, every ray, because every ray carries its story, its frequency. And then what I see is, like I said, it's a window into the physical body so that we can utilize our bodies to the best to our abilities. So if you show up and you know that you are vibrating to the blue, which is the number 1 ray on the planet, that means you are here to communicate. What is our biggest what's the biggest, I don't want to say technology, what is our biggest event, there's the word I want, on the planet right now, and that's technology of communication.
Right.
We are in the communication cycle, right? It's number 1. And it's why? It's because all the people that are being born, or the highest number at this point, are of blue ray, because we are here to change how we communicate and how we communicate globally. They are the speakers, the communicators, the comedians, the storytellers, the artists, there's just that whole guild. Most of our actors are communicators. Most of our comedians are the communicators. A lot of our politicians are the communicators. Mm-hmm. And then I've got like 2 very strong blue rays in my family. And since I'm on that frequency for a moment, that vibrates to the throat, that vibrates to the thyroid and the thyroid meridian. The thyroid meridian is all about, the negatives of it are, and it's one of the harder ones, if you will. It's about depression, despair, hopelessness, grief, despondency, loneliness, solitude, some really nice happy words there. But of all the rays, they have the greatest tendency to go down the rabbit hole. You can see it reflected in our comedians. A lot of them have been depressed. A lot of them have emotional challenges. A lot of our actors do. My son, my older son's a blue ray, and because I've been aware of this, it's like, okay, I'm throwing your rope. Come on up. I'm not letting you go down the rabbit hole. Sorry, no more whining about this. Come on, get up here. And so my adage to him is always, okay, I'm giving you a shovel. We're going to fill up your hole. You can't go down there. We're going to plant a tree. You can sit under your Bodhi tree and contemplate, but you're not going down the hole. You're not doing it. Because that's the tendency. Because why? It's because it corresponds to that throat and that meridian of that emotional frequency. So if you're aware of that, then you can supplement not only your brain, but your body, with the right kinds of foods, the right kind of vitamins, and exercise activities to help augment that and change it so that you have the ability to be the best communicator that you can be.
So Candia, let me just be clear about this. So the blue ray is what you're saying is for people who are put here to learn to communicate. Is that correct?
Yeah, they are here to share their communication skills with everybody else. That's why we've got, we're actually almost inundated with communication.
Oh, yeah, because as you said, you take a look at entertainers. They're here to communicate. I mean, look at how many talent shows are now on television. It's almost becoming, an entertainment factory, if you will. It's almost like there's too much of it.
Well, that's true. I mean, and all we have to do is text. We can.
Well, that was the next point I was going to make, because you say how the Blu-ray, which I find that's funny when you think of the Blu-ray DVD disc. And that's what came to mind, and then you said entertainment and comedy and this and that. About Blu-ray discs, I wonder who thought of that one,
somebody was totally unconsciously conscious about it.
Right.
Very cool. I hadn't thought about that, but that's brilliant. I love that.
Now, here's the thing, though. Now, what do you say, because you see so much of this, about people who are on the cell phones texting? It's almost like they would rather do that than talk on the phone, and certainly would rather do that than actually talk to other people face-to-face.
Right.
Is that a different frequency, different ray color there that's going on? Or?
Well, no, those are all. That's still the blue.
Still the same thing.
And a person that's doing that all the time may not necessarily be a blue ray frequency, but they're being caught up with the frequency of energy. Like let's say you and I were sitting face to face. There's space and energy between us, right?
Okay.
Well, you think about the cell phones, microwaves. All that energy is being caught in the air around us. Well, the same is true of the energy between people. So colors are being amplified out there, and the fact that there are, like I said, the number one ray on the planet is the blue ray, that energy is being captivated and captured by everybody else. So we're all in this frenzy to communicate with everybody all the time. However, I think what you brought up is perfectly valid, and this shows we're in the over 50 they're grouping, because I'm going, could you just call up your girlfriend? Could you just talk to her?
Right.
Just texting her. No, you need to communicate. And I really, truly believe in my heart of hearts that this level will eventually move on, because they're going to recognize that they still have to communicate heart to heart. And you're not going to get that in a text or an email or via Facebook or any of the other social media. You have to go to a deeper level.
Mm-hmm. Now, because you're intuitive, I'm going to take a shot here, and I don't put myself out there that much. How would you see the ray that I perhaps am operating on? I mean, I've been a communicator most of my life, and most people, especially as I was a child, would say, you sometimes can't get them to shut up and get a word in edgewise. But over the years, it was something that, and it's interesting, Candia, to pay attention, and this is for our listeners as well, because I was punished a lot for that, especially in class, being disruptive. Then I get into the workplace, and I start experiencing the same thing. And eventually, it was almost as though I came to a point where I thought, there is something really seriously wrong with me here. But the point was, for me, what I began to learn is, no, it's just where you're putting what you naturally are in the wrong place.
That's brilliantly said.
And I started moving it over to something in that simple shift. People were all of a sudden I was being celebrated, like, wow, you're really good at this. And I was excited, because it was like, well, I'm not broken. But think of all the people out there that, find themselves in an arena, and they haven't been nurtured, and they maybe haven't taken the time to be able to drift into an arena where they could be appreciated and celebrated for whatever their ray color is.
If you're okay with this, who and what you are. When I see your ray, I see you, of course, as vibrating as the blue ray, but you also have a halo. Now, and I will explain that to the listeners in the sense, not everybody has a halo. Not everybody chooses to have a halo because you're coming in with more than one agenda. So it makes it more complicated, right? Which is what exactly has happened to you. You were put into a place and space that was, you were out of sorts with what your vibration was, because your halo was actually the indigo ray as the visionary. So you're a visionary communicator. And are you perfectly matched with what you're doing now? Absolutely. It's fantastic. And so that visionary ray, the indigo ray, vibrates to the third eye, the seat of our intuition, sits in the middle of our forehead, corresponds to the pituitary. And so with that being said, you are out there now in a space and place where you are able to communicate your visionary concepts and your visionary ideals. As a child, that was, you were outside of your realm because you were trying to fit the square peg in a round hole, because you as a visionary weren't necessarily hanging out with visionaries. And so they thought of you as this loudmouth, obnoxious kid, when you really weren't. You were just being who you are. And that's why I feel that the more that parents understand who their children are, they will have a better opportunity to nurture who they are and then instill their greatest gifts in them as children, so that as adults they can become the best they can be, so they're not fighting the system. When I look at you, you were like a trout trying to swim upstream, trying to find your place, whereas instead of being able to go with the flow, now if we were all given that opportunity to be in our flow, imagine what creative adults we would be, instead of filled with all this angst and low self-esteem and lack of self-confidence and all the issues, shame, you name it, that we deal with, a lot of anger issues. It's because, and it still goes back, bottom line, to parenting, and so if the parents are more aware, then the children are more aware, and then they become more aware as adults. So that's what I see you as, is this visionary communicator. So you came in with the double agenda, and it's, in terms of our evolutionary process, you and I grew up in a time when people were a little more aware, but not that much more aware. I mean, what I do today is much more acceptable than it was even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, and keep going back. I mean, now, we've got Reiki in the hospitals, for God's sake. How amazing is that?
Right, and acupuncture you can get on your insurance program.
Yeah, the world has changed dramatically in the last 15, 20 years, especially the last 10. So with that being said, you chose to come in as one of the forefathers, if you will, one of the people that step out to help grab everybody else's hands to say, hey, come with me, because I'm here to show you a different way of looking at it. So that's what your job has been, and what you're doing now on the radio and sharing this, which is so perfect. I can't even, just like to give you the biggest hug, how perfect that you are sharing this with an audience that is an older audience and a little newer to this concept. That my kids and their friends are much more, oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, yeah. And they don't take into account, like my parents' philosophy. They're much more readily accepting than my parents. And so we're in the middle of that, right? So you are reaching an audience that is open and yet resistant, not always aware of what's going on, not because that they don't want to be, it's just that they weren't necessarily exposed because of their environment. So that's what your job is to share these ideas and concepts and have people like me and all the other people you have on your show to help open up awareness. Again, just know, you can put that on your door, to your studio that says, okay, visionary communicator. That's your new
Well,
label.
the truth is, Beyond 50, believe it or not, we have 3 words we like to go by: visionary, informative, and fun. That's actually on our banner as we go out and talk to the world. We're out there face-to-face with people. They look at that, they mouth out Beyond 50, and we're visionary, informative, and fun.
I think that's brilliant. And you know what else? Blu-ray people are very, very fun rays. I'd say of all the different rays, they are probably the most lighthearted and fun. And yet the flip of that, of course, there's always the shadow side. They're the most likely to go down the rabbit hole, like I said, most likely to go down into depression, most likely to go into addiction. Doesn't mean the other rays don't have them, but a lot of times if there's a green ray's gone into addictions, it could be because there's a blue halo corresponding to it. And yet the flip and the most positive part where all the light shines on the blue ray, they are the most fun. They are the light of the party.
And think about that, what you're saying too, Candia, is earlier as you were saying in the blue rays, that these are people who tend to be people like comedians, entertainers, I don't know, singers, musicians. And you're right, when you take a look at that realm, these people, you tend to see a lot of addiction and addictive behavior in them. And as I described to people who go, well, I don't understand why they do that. What is this, fame and fortune? I said, no, it takes a lot out of a person to be like that.
Absolutely.
And they need a way to be able to shut down from the world, to take a break for a while, you know, to kind of be with their own thoughts, just to quiet the world down, to recharge, to get back out there and do it again. That's why you pay these people the big bucks, the really good ones, because they really put themselves out there.
Well, look at Heath Ledger.
Right.
I mean, he ended up having to, you know, what killed him were the drugs, you know, and the combination of the drugs, because his role overtook his own person, you know.
Right.
To play the Joker, he was so maniacal that to get into that headset was difficult, and it starts invading your dreams, invading who you are and how you look at life. So you betcha. I mean, I personally wouldn't want that job. I mean, I love to watch a good movie, you know, so I am totally impressed that someone can take that on and become that character. You know, it is impressive.
Like Johnny Depp, for instance.
Oh, all of them. I mean, there's some amazing actors and actresses out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, they have that tendency. But again, if you look at it from another viewpoint, too, not only is that's the emotional component, but the physical component is it corresponds to the thyroid and the thyroid meridian. And if that goes off, and ironically, it's amazing how many Blu-rays end up with thyroid issues if they're not on top of things, if they're not speaking their truth, if they're not being who they came here to be, that then the thyroid shows up. I can spot them every single time, and then if the thyroid hasn't been activated and, you know, going down the negative, if they don't catch it, you can already see that the T cells are starting to shift and change. So the more that they're on top of it, you can avoid any kind of thyroid issues.
Mm-hmm.
But that, because they have chosen that ray, they know ahead of time that there is a proclivity towards going down the rabbit hole, but they choose it anyway. Why? Because they're coming here to express the best that they can, because they feel, especially on the other side, oh, I can override it. Life's not going to get in the way. I'm going to go out there and shine my light. And we get here, we forget, and we're going, oh, my God, this is tough.
Right. Takes a little work, folks. Now, here's the thing. Now, you had mentioned that I was Blu-ray and then indigo halo, so we're looking at two different colors here. Is it possible that a person can move from one color to the next? And as you also say in soul rays, is that no one color is better than the other, so just to, you know, kind of let our listeners know out there, you know, you are what you are, discover what that is, but is it possible to move in between different colors? Is that advisable?
Well, I think that's a really good question. My feeling, my sense on this, and everybody's perception is their own, so if it doesn't resonate, that's totally cool, but from my experience of working with people, it's like if you decide, and I'll use me as an example, I'm an Aquarian, and I love Leos. Could I decide all of a sudden, I think I want to be born in August instead, so I can be a Leo? Not going to happen in this life. So from my perspective, the same is true of a soul ray. However, what you can do is work with your auric field, which is the energy field around you, and if you were to have a camera, the Carillion camera, where you could capture the essence of it, or I don't know if an infrared would capture it or not, but you know, a specific kind of camera that could capture that energy, you will notice that if you take your picture today and then again on Sunday and then the next Friday, that the colors will change, and that's because your emotional fields are changing. So the energy in the field of energy around you, the color will shift and change. So you can play within that field so that you can vibrate. You know, let's say you've been really cranky and you're really upset because of the state of, you know, your work or the politics or whatever, and you're going to be vibrating with all this red energy and this wild energy, and then you recognize, oh, I'm going to shrug that off, I'm going to shift, and then I'm going to move into a state of peace, I'm going to change how I feel about this. You start spending more time out in nature, so then your energy, that color, the auric field, will shift and change. So that part I feel will change, but I don't feel the soul ray itself will, because why? We are choosing a frequency to live out a lifetime, because a lifetime in the big picture is just a blink. We're not here very long, so you want to take as much as you can from our quick 100 years, if we're lucky, to express that and get into it and learn as much as you can, and maybe sink into some of the negative aspects so that you can then reside in the light of the ray and learn from it and grow, so that by the time your last sunset arrives, you will have captured the essence of that ray to its utmost. That's how I see it.
Okay, good. So really, when you come in and you come to know your talents, the idea is express them as far and as big and as deep as you can possibly go then, right?
Exactly. And I thank you for bringing that other aspect up about nobody is above the other person.
Right.
For example, the violet ray, we always have a tendency to think of violet as being very, very spiritual, and it is, and those souls who choose a violet ray, because there are books out there on Saint Germain of the violet ray, and it's this high vibratory pattern, because if you look at it in terms of the light spectrum, it vibrates at a higher level than the red, which is more dense. But it doesn't mean that that soul is any more advanced or any better or any of it. It just means that soul has chosen a different, walk, if you will, through this, 100-year journey.
And they certainly don't pick very comfortable furniture, do they?
I've thought about it that way, but that's the very The violet rays are those who choose, as an example, because it deals with the pineal gland, which is our connector to our higher self and to source. They choose to come in, and it's not a lifetime, I think, would be easy, because they say, I can sign up for this. This is going to be a cakewalk because I want to accelerate my growth. And a violet ray will say, okay, throw it on me, and they will feel as if they've lived 100 lifetimes in one lifetime, because they will taste and touch and do anything and everything and go to the greatest highs and the greatest lows to accelerate their growth rate while they're here. Not an easy choice.
Now, here's something to touch on that I think could be very important in perspective of what you're talking about here with soul rays. And this is certainly going to be, your opinion from your intuitive experience. Now, there's a lot going on when it comes to these shootings and the gun laws. Now, I walk on this particular subject with, just light trepidation in some ways, because I don't want to turn this into a political point of view or, a heavily opinionated one, but more of, what do you think is really going on here? Why are we experiencing, for instance, these children or these teens who are going into schools and committing these acts of violence? And it seems to be happening, like I said, seems to be more often now. What is going on there, and what ray or color are we looking at here?
Well, you know what? I hadn't even thought about that, but that is a really great question. I feel that, of course, it's a huge insider story that's going on. I feel that if we were to look deeper into these kids' lives, I'm a real believer that, again, back to the dark cabal, that there is definitely an element of the psychotropic drugs that are out there, and that if we were to dig into more of the conspiracy level, that I wouldn't be surprised if somehow or other these kids have been fed drugs. I also feel there's an autistic level, and the autistic level comes because of shots, our immunizations, where then every autistic child I've ever seen, they're not in their body. Their souls are literally splintered. They're not in their body, so they have an emotional disconnect because their bodies are so filled with toxins. Then you put on top of that foods that are disruptive to the brain, and that disrupts the actions of the person because they don't think anymore rationally because they're disrupted with chemicals. So it's so multi-layered
and
full. And then you go into the very, very poor parenting because the parents aren't there and not dealing with what I would call loving discipline, because our kids today have not been told no. We have a generation of kids that expect everything and don't have any boundaries. We need to be telling our children, no, this is what I expect of you. I expect of you with the best ideals. These kids are not getting it. So you've got another layer of that. And then if I were to look at the Sandy Hook guy, I don't even know his name at this point because I just like tune it out, that young gentleman, I would look at him as they're Blu-rays, because they are the ones most likely to go down that rabbit hole of depression. So you go into that emotional despondency, despair, that there is nothing out there. They get so low, and then they get caught in with the drugs, and then on top of that you go into autism, and top of that you go into the chemicals that are absolutely, that's a whole other topic. That's a whole, you and I could talk a whole day on foods, because I am a food Nazi, and I'm a real believer in what we put in our mouth is absolutely impacting our physical health. So you put that into a child, a young man whose body is taxed anyway because of the immunizations and being autistic, or a form of autism, or being out of body, you're setting yourself up with a real can of worms.
You know, the reason I asked that, and you were talking about how, well, there's the possibility, of the psychotropic drugs, and how what we're seeing, because of immunizations, more of what would be considered the autistic spectrum, and that their souls are splintered, or they're just sort of really not there. And anybody who's really had direct experience with, the autistic spectrum of kids, teenagers, maybe even adults, could probably relate to what you were saying. They just don't seem there. It's almost like they've checked out. Or they come in and out. You literally can see this in their eyes. And the reason I find that interesting is because you talk about walk-in soul rays. Now, this was actually talked about briefly here on the program some months ago about what are called walk-ins. And it was posited that a walk-in, sort of another soul kind of walks into the body and pretty much takes it over. Now, you have a different perspective on this from what I was reading, which I thought was really fascinating, but I thought, okay, so if a kid's already checked out because, as you said, maybe there's poor parenting, the school has been beating up on them a little bit, there's no friends, as you see in a lot of these cases with the shootings, perhaps there is drug use, so, they're not really finding a connection to anything. Now, in the perspective that I was told about, and again, this was months ago, of a walk-in, here is an opportunity for that so-called dark evil force to step into a body, go ahead and commit this act, because it now has the opportunity with no responsibility, step out of it, okay, now you're left on your own. And I'm thinking of a really fascinating movie that kind of touches on this called Fallen, starring Denzel Washington. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, where it does that. There's this sort of evil soul that can step into a human body, and just basically do whatever it wants and step out. It starts in the movie where a guy's about to be executed for murder, and he's all flippant, as he's sitting in the gas chamber, and Denzel Washington's talking to him. He was the one that brought him down. The next thing you know, they fire up the gas. The next thing you know, you hear sort of this Rolling Stones song, and they're kind of moving away up into the air and out, and this guy all of a sudden is starting to realize that he's sitting in the gas chamber about to be gassed, so he's back into his body while this soul that caused all these problems for him is gone. He's going somewhere else. And you think of the walk-in that way, you think, ooh, this is kind of crazy. Maybe you don't want to be drinking or using drugs too much.
Exactly. Well, you know what? Along those lines, there's a part of that I agree with and part that I don't.
Right.
And what I see is when a soul is completely out of their light, because I think this is absolutely imperative. Once you know what your light is, if you stand in your light every day, it will change how you do.
Well, a lot of things, I'm sure, yeah.
Absolutely, and 99.999% of the people, population, globally do not stand in the light because emotionally we're taken out, something rattles our cage, and all of our emotional triggers are activated, and we're out of our light. So when we're out of our light, and then we have all these other factors that are actively participating in our lives, from parenting to drugs to you name it, right, what we just spoke about, you then become this great big party playground that because there are multiple layers and levels and dimensions and frequencies, etc., of energy, and that all those, and there are darker levels of energy that go, oh my God, he's a party, let's go. So they all glom on into that auric field, and you have those that I feel are the entities that hang on, and they're kind of like little schools of fish that hang around and amplify the negativity, and then you have those that are hitchhikers that literally attach themselves to the soul's energy or the physical body that then can impact the physical aspects, their health. It can impact how they mentally and emotionally respond to things. So that's how I see what it could be. It's not, instead of literally being in and out of body,
right.
I see it more as an attachment than the negative. Not to say, though, that there are channelers out there that have not been clear enough, and then they allow darker frequencies to come in and speak through them. And I do believe in that. And those guys come in and go. So I guess my invitation is to those who are out there to really pay attention to the information that is being given, because not all channelers, and they're doing it from the right space. I'm not saying that they're not. Just sometimes they have attracted lower energies that then come through and speak to them. Or through them. So on a certain level, you could look at it that way. But I feel that a walk-in is from the divine blueprint. It's really about raising the consciousness of that person, and so they have this commitment from one soul to the other. Because the soul in the physical body is so tired, they find, I need to check out, but I'm not going to ruin a body. The soul from the other side says, great opportunity, you're 18 or 25 or whatever. I could use your body. I don't have to be a baby again. This is fabulous. I'm here. But they then adopt that frequency, that ray of their astrological time-space moment of being born, so that configuration of the astrology chart, in addition to if that person is a green ray or a red ray or an indigo ray or whatever, they take on that frequency to expand the rest of their life. But they're coming from a perspective of being on the other side, so they are more consciously aware, and they don't necessarily lose the veil as quickly or as thickly when they do the exchange. Right.
Yeah, because that's what I was seeing about what you had put on there. It's two souls that kind of decided, hey, guy, this is just too much for me. I'm kind of getting sick of all this. Why don't you go ahead and step in here and take over for here, and I'm going to go somewhere else for a while, or maybe sit in the break room or something like that. And I looked at that as a walk, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting and can make sense. And then I started thinking, and again, I know I make a lot of references as people listen to the program to movies, but I think this is kind of a good way to put it. But the movie Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah. So, he gets the chance. He steps into a rich guy who just happens to be physically fit enough so he can go and continue his dream to play in the Super Bowl. And it was just, it's one of my favorite movies as well. But, when I was reading that about walk-in soul rays, I said, here's a different perspective from the, they're waiting and, and it's the dark evil forces that are going to step in and take over, as much as the reference that I made earlier. But it isn't usually like that, as for the most part, what you're saying.
No, I from my experience, no. Okay. The walk-ins that I have encountered have all been here with what I would call a higher calling. They're here to expand. One is an example. There was a gal that I worked with back in the 90s. It's been a while. And she became an astrologer. She went into NLP and was an astrologer, and yet the younger part of her years were not easy. The experience of the soul that had been there. She, of course, then collected all those memories and then made them hers. However, there was a break when in her early mid-20s where things shifted and she became the walk-in and then started changing the course of her life and moved in, like I said, into NLP and astrology and into being of service.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kinds of walk-ins that I have encountered. Doesn't mean there aren't negative ones out there, but I guess maybe it's my eternal optimistic soul that I have that I just don't necessarily want to believe it. Could happen. I've learned one thing is never say never, right?
Right. Now, I know that we have just a few short minutes here, but one of the things I'd like you to touch on is briefly as you can, do the time that we have left, is that people can actually discover what their soul ray is, their light is, and you talk about a couple of things that they can do. Touch on one or two of those quickly, if you could, to give people an idea how they can do this. The first thing they can do, and the easiest thing I would suggest, is get the book. It's on Kindle. It's Soul Ray. You can find it online. And where else can you get it as well? Is it just a Kindle book?
It's just a Kindle book right now.
Okay.
I am in the process of having it printed. So eventually, if you come to, any of my workshops or shows, I'll have it on print. And it will go on to Amazon in print as well.
I don't know that even matters this day and age. I hardly ever see anybody holding a hard copy of a book anymore.
It's really true. That's why I haven't jumped right on it yet. I know I have some. I'm learning the publishing tricks these days.
Right.
So back to your question.
How to discover your soul ray light.
Right. First of all, you can, what I want to do is share this information with more intuitives, with more healers, so that they become more clear on this, so they can help their clients that come to them. But personally, individually can do it themselves. There are 3 options. One is using a pendulum. The second one is taking your head off, which means you literally have to do this kind of quick meditation where you pick your head off and set it aside, and you drop your energy down into your heart and then go through the rays. And it's not necessarily going to be your favorite color, because your favorite color, may not be the one, because you've got other challenges that you're here to learn. And then the third one is between all of these, of course. Oh God, I'm trying to think what in my book we've got the taking your head off, the pendulum, and then, of course, seeing a psychic. That would be good. I'm trying to think what my third one is. You took me totally off guard. I'm so into my, because there are 3 of them. What was my third one? This is really bad when I can't even remember my own book.
That's okay.
Taking your head off. Because one of my greatest, I think it's a quick tool, is learning to take your head off, which is literally picking your head up like a mime and setting it down and dropping your energy into your heart. And then when you let that open up and expand and your heart becomes full, you can do this with anything and everything. You can say, okay, should I take this job? Take your head off, you drop your energy into your heart, and letting your heart open up. And even if it opens up halfway or even 3/4, don't do it, because unless it's a full meal deal, your intuition and your heart are telling you, it's not the way to go. And to me, it's one of the quickest, easiest ways to learn your soul ray and or any intuitive thing. Pendulum takes a little longer. And the third one, of course, is where I totally spaced for a moment, brain freeze, is kinesiology, is learning how to muscle test.
Okay, great. And this is something people can actually learn to do and do at home?
Oh, yeah, and in the book, I go through how to do it step by step in the book, how you can learn how to do it.
Oh, fascinating. Again, Candia, and for our listeners out there, the book is Soul Rays, and, it's fascinating because there's so much we could talk about, in this book. We've only just touched on a couple of things here, but, I remember going to a talk that you held late last year, and you were talking about this, and I really hadn't heard about Soul Rays before. And as you were piecing it together in the different, colors, again, we only touched on a couple of things here. And you started, pinpointing, well, here's an example of, for instance, Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, and you went on to different aspects of different people in different colors. And I thought, that's really fascinating, because it's almost sort of like signs of the zodiac. Here tends to be the behavior of the Leo, as you talked about, and being Aquarius or Libra, for instance. And it kind of gives you a better understanding of, how you can relate to the world, I guess, if you have kind of a better idea of what this is all about.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I do feel that's the case, because I have all my kids and their friends all ask me, they call me up or they text me, what color is this person? So they can have a better clue as to how to interact with them from their highest and best good.
Right.
And it really does make a difference. And it is. It's just a window. That's all it is. You don't need to label people. It's just a window, no differently than saying I'm an Aquarius, right? It's just a window. But it's a window that is helpful. And personally, like I said, it really can make a difference in your health. Not only your emotional health and your mental health, but your physical health. Very
good. Candia, please give out your website quickly so people can find out more.
Okay, real easy. It's just my name, CandiaSanders.com. There is a website dedicated solely to the book, Soul Rays, which is soul-rays.com. So between the two of them, you'll be able to get information. They'll both link you up to Amazon. And like I said, the website Soul-Rays speaks to the book and goes into it a little more deeply.
Candia, thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time.
You bet it. Well, I want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. So discover your soul ray. What is your light? Learn to be in it so you can share with the world what that special light is and be able to give people permission to automatically do the same. I'm Daniel Davis. We thank you for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do have a free weekly e-newsletter that we put out there. Go ahead and sign up for that as well. We'll have a hot link where you can find out more about Candia Sanders and your soul rays. Again, thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Remember, folks, live your day past halfway.